Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 66. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you'd like more information about the podcast, previous guests, want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all on the website, desertladydiaries.com. And I invite you to engage with me on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries, and on Twitter at Desert Lady Diary. Today's episode has some grittier language than you're accustomed to hearing here. It's not used gratuitously and is very relevant to the subject of my guest's new book. I'm talking to Joshua Tree author Susan Rukeyser, who recently published a book titled Feckless Cunt, a feminist anthology. Susan will also graciously read one of the pieces from the book near the end of the episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Today on the podcast is Susan Rukeyser. She's the editor and publisher of Feckless Cunt, a feminist anthology from World Split Open Press. She is the author of a novel, Not on Fire, Only Dying, from Twisted Road Publications, which was published in 2015, and a chapbook of tiny stories, Swap Meat, from Joshua Tree Space Cowboy Books. In 2017, she moved home to the Mojave, although she grew up in Connecticut. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
What was your very first experience with desert?
It was completely by chance. I was living in Georgia, deep in a hollow, and it was humid and rainy a lot of the time, and I have some family in Los Angeles, and we would come out to visit, and I dropped my son off at camp. He was going to go to summer camp on Catalina Island, and I just decided to see what was east of Los Angeles. And so we ended up in Desert Hot Springs, and then looked at a map and said, looks like there's some kind of park up the road. Might as well check that out. Drove up there and realized, well, that's home. So now I need to figure out how to move here, even though it connected in no way to my life at the time.
Right.
So
can you describe at all what it was like when you did come up here? And do you remember was there a moment that it suddenly hit you that...
It certainly hit me as soon as you kind of pass through Yucca Valley, and then you're in Joshua Tree, and boom, it just opens up. And then, of course, we went into the park, and the sun, I had already been quite aware of the fact that my mood was tied to the weather, and there's just no getting around that.
Right.
I had my little happy light, my little blue light, and I used it religiously, and I wasn't happy. And I went there, and I was just high as a kite. The sunshine made me high. I felt energized. I felt happy. I felt like I could create all this stuff, and it just felt like where I belonged, even though, I grew up in Connecticut, so
right.
It did not look familiar at all.
So when you visited LA and your son went to camp, were you living in Connecticut at that time?
No, I had been in Georgia at that point for a while, sort of a strange trajectory. Went back and forth to the Northeast a few times, but the most recent, I was working in New Jersey. Then we moved to Texas, moved to Georgia. So all in all, I spent 12 years in Texas and Georgia, which were so different from what I was used to. And I was, for a lot of that time, a housewife and a mom. And I was trying to write. I mean, I did write. I got my novel published during that time. But I felt like, as far as creating new work, I was in trouble. Because I wasn't myself. I was watching my mouth. I was watching my manners, which were all wrong.
Right, yeah.
Because it was all wrong from the beginning.
Right.
And I'm just like, I'm not really a suburbs gal, it turns out, anyway, because I don't like the things you're supposed to like, and I want to talk about the things you're not supposed to talk about. So that makes me difficult company at like a cookie swap.
Especially in the South.
In the South,
right.
Yes. I was a lot.
Yeah, well, I lived in Charlotte for 6 years, so, it's, hi, Susan, how are you? What church do you go to?
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And not that there's anything wrong with church,
right?
But it's just an interesting theme that you notice when you don't come from that sort of atmosphere.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
And it's when you realize, like, well, my answer to that question is so complicated, starting with I'm half Jewish. And I just felt less and less interested in getting into that whole conversation, because all it did is make people uncomfortable anyway.
Right. Yeah.
It would have helped if I'd gotten into, like, college football or something, because then at least I could have switched the conversation to that.
Right.
That's the other thing that people are really into down there, but it was not to be.
Not for you.
So I was just a weird loner for most, especially towards the end when I kind of gave up on finding an artistic community there.
That's just interesting. It kind of reminds me of my own trajectory here, which was from Jersey to Charlotte to Cleveland, which was, I call it the 6 years I won't get back.
Right.
Very similar to what you experienced in the South with not being yourself and kind of putting your creative pursuits on the back burner.
Yes.
It was very difficult.
Yeah.
And then down to Florida, and then to LA.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then to the desert.
Right.
So I get you.
Yes.
Which is interesting because I picked up something out of an interview you did, and I want to read it because I think it plays right into what I've just said.
All right.
This deep instinctual push some of us feel to keep pressing forward, stay light on our feet, don't get settled or stuck because we're not home yet.
Yeah. That's how I felt up until last year, honestly.
Yeah.
Then in this place that really made no sense, and I didn't have much of a plan, but it felt like home, so went towards that. Up until then, I definitely, you're not from around here was something I heard a lot. I was just never quite, I feel like there's space enough out here for all of us to make a home. So
Right. So from that moment when you had that great time in the park, when you left, walk me through what happened to get you here to live.
Well, that was 8 years it took.
Wow.
8 years of me coming back in every season, renting, being very careful about which Airbnbs I rented because I wanted the most authentic experience. I wanted to live like a local, shop, eat like a local. So I really wanted to see, and I would just drive off on roads and see if I could find my way back. It was a lot of going out there, getting that dose of sun that I knew was the best drug I'd ever had and probably the best for me, and that I needed more of that. It was just really for, hopefully also for my creativity, for my writing, but just for my mental health. It seemed necessary to get myself out here. So I just sort of planned it, and then my 50th birthday was coming up, and it was kind of like, if not now, when my son graduated and went to college in the summer of 2017, so the timing was perfect. Up until then, I was kind of locked in because he was in a great magnet program in Georgia, and I wasn't going to pull him out of that.
Sure.
But he was cool with me leaving. I was cool with me leaving.
Yeah.
And it worked out great.
And he just started, did he just, he's second year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
right.
And he's in Philadelphia, and he loves it. And he's always been independent, which is, part of that is because I sent him off to summer camp.
Right.
You know, all over the place. So.
Yeah, that's great. So he's used to kind of making friends with people and doing that. So great segue.
Yeah.
When you got here then, did you know anyone when you moved here?
I knew absolutely no one, and had been in such a weird space that I was like, that's okay. I don't need people. I'll just be out here by myself in the desert. And it turns out like it's been one of the most socially active times of my life. And I have to thank Facebook for that, honestly, because they're the ones who, it was Facebook that told me about the Choya Needles open mics and poetry readings. And then I went down to that one, and Rich Seuss was very welcoming to me. First time I went, he said, what are you reading? And I said, oh, I'm just listening today. And he's like, all right, well, next time. The next time he came up to me and he was like, you have something, right? So he pulled me right into this community. And yeah, it was wonderful. And then I was not just reading work, which I hadn't done too much of in the last couple of years, but writing like crazy. I wrote this whole chapbook that was ultimately published by a Space Cowboy, just like in the first 9 months of being here.
Wow.
So that was all. I was trying to get rid of my moving boxes, and so I went in deep on the online marketplaces where people are using, getting rid of used stuff that they have strong emotional feelings about oftentimes, but not a lot of words to say about them. And so I just made up stories about those. It was fascinating to me.
Oh, that's interesting. I can't wait to read it. Thanks for bringing it.
Oh, sure. And it's still, of course, for sale at Space Cowboy.
Great. And they're so great over there.
Yes.
They do so much. They're so generous with their space. And they are very supportive of the writing community and just the community in general.
Right.
So I love
It's such a great hub. For me, that's kind of where it all rotates around. And I don't know how they do it all. I don't know how Jean-Paul writes as well as does all this other stuff.
discipline.
Yeah, discipline. Probably. Yeah. It's a real gift for the community.
Yeah, they are. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Moving here then from East Coast suburbs.
Yeah.
and encountering the landscape and the wildlife and things like that. How was that at the beginning of your trajectory here?
At the beginning, I was very overwhelmed. I was really feeling like this place was much wilder than it is in some ways. I also didn't understand how helpful, what a tight community this is here. That if you need help, someone here will help you. But I really felt like I was kind of alone in the desert, and I was so glad to be done with mosquitoes and stuff, things that bite and itch, because I'm very reactive to that kind of thing. I kind of have respect for things that can do me real damage more than just annoy me or make me itch. But so far, I say that kind of glibly, not having had any real run-ins yet with anything big. I was just away on another feckless cunt publicity thing, and my dog sitter found a tarantula on my back patio, which I'm still really not completely comfortable with, but I guess the spider was there first. But
right.
And I did, the day I rolled up to the house that I bought here, which had been vacant for a few weeks at that point, there was a chuckwalla sitting right on the front.
Oh.
Yeah, which I thought, like, that's got to be a good omen.
He's the welcoming committee, like the welcome wagon guy.
And then he shuffled off and never came back because I have cats and stuff. But,
They're really cool. I saw one of those for the first time in the park last year, and I'd never seen one before, and I was like, oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Big lizard.
They're very cool.
Yeah.
So you have a book that just came out that you published too.
Yes.
So we can talk a little bit about the self-publishing part of it. Right. But let's talk about the impetus behind writing this book called Feckless Cunt.
Yes. So I had recently published Swap Meet and was very much just focused on what I would write next. I always have a few projects in the works. But then I'd been in sort of a tense state, like a lot of us had been, for a year and a half at that point, ever since Trump won the election, which was not exactly shocking to me, but absolutely devastating. And it just made me wonder about where I live, this country in general. And it just was so, like a lot of us, everything he does, everything he says, and the people that he brings into this administration, so triggering and so upsetting and enraging. Most of the time we try and ignore it or see it in perspective or something. But at late May, everybody was talking about these screaming and crying babies at the border. We were seeing it on TV, we were hearing it on the radio, these little children who were being torn from their parents. I still get emotional just thinking about it, because I think about if someone tried to take my son out of my arms at that point, I would then end up in jail probably. But these people are trying to follow the rules. They believe that if they follow the rules, this is a fair country, this is an ethical country, and it will be okay. And it wasn't okay, and we stole children. I mean, there are still hundreds of children not reunited with their families. I cannot believe, it's like an international kidnapping scandal. Any case, that one hit me particularly hard, and it was just a moment, I describe it as a moment of enough, just enough. And it wasn't just about this one, the children being separated, it was the hypocrisy, it was all of it. Just the nastiness, the gleeful hatefulness. It's like a mind game. They try and make us believe that these things are equal, and this, and up is down and black is white, and it's maddening. It feels like gaslighting. I think some of us have experienced it in our personal lives as well. It's just, So I tweeted something offhand, just like, I should make a literary journal called Feckless Cunt. So Samantha Bee had just called Ivanka Trump a feckless cunt. Basically, the context was, do something. Right. Don't post a picture of yourself with your kid, which is what Ivanka had done, that very evening when it was all over the news. It just seemed like she is either really, really out of it, or it was so malicious, because there she is holding one of her babies in her arms. And so anyway, Samantha Bee thought it was a fair enough request that Ivanka, who put herself out there as the advocate for families in this administration, might do something about this. There's huge backlash to her using that word, which people do not like. People do not like women using bad words, period, and that one is the very, very baddest of all the bad words. And she issued an apology, which I really respect, and I think all celebrities should read, because it was so carefully worded. First of all, she apologized to all women who were hurt by it, because she knew that some women have heard that in the worst moments of their lives, and she never wanted to hurt any women. She also acknowledged that she, in that context, used it as an insult, and she wasn't reclaiming it, which is what she has tried to do in the past by using it. So she acknowledged that that wasn't quite right. But she did not apologize for saying the word, and she also made sure that it was clear that she did not care what men or people without cunts thought of this word. And I thought that was really important and brave of her to say at a time when I'm sure she's getting a lot of pressure to just take it all back. I like that we're getting into an era now where if it doesn't affect you personally, your job is to listen, not talk, and certainly not judge.
Right.
So I tweeted a thing saying, I should make a literary journal called Feckless Cunt. And I got kind of a surprisingly enthusiastic response from a lot of women writers. I have kind of a large social media writers community, thank goodness. That's what kept me afloat in Georgia.
Right.
And a lot of them were like, I will submit to that. Do it. So I thought about it, and I was like, this really seems like a one-time anthology. It's just of this moment. I want to do it as quickly as possible, like a pop-up instant publication, so it doesn't become old news. And then I kept it really vague. It was just like, what did this bring forth in you? It doesn't have to be about Samantha Bee or Donald Trump or the migrant crisis or anything. Just what does living in Donald Trump's America for a year and a half bring forth in you?
As a woman.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was really interesting because so much came in, and I had to kind of find the
common threads
of the story.
and,
yes.
Yeah.
And Jean Paul actually helped me with this, giving me the idea of telling a story with the choices that you make, that you start out. So it sort of starts out very political, very specifically responding to this episode. Well, then I guess it gets into sort of like a sex-positive thing. There's definitely a sex-positive part, but then that, of course, curdles into like more of the Me Too stuff and just how it feels to be in this country with the gender oppression and just constant, like, the menacing threats that follow girls and women, and just it's always there. It's never not there. And then I tried to bring it back around to some hopefulness, and which I believe will come from a different way of being, not from getting a nice white male president back in the White House who isn't such a monster. I do believe we need to do things completely differently. We need to look to the female energy and cooperation and community and linked, not ranked,
Right.
All of it.
Connected.
Just change all of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that in the book, you kind of take that journey. And it's a lot to sit down and read it all at once. I'm always impressed when people tell me they've done that, because I'm like, how are you? Are you okay? Can I buy you a drink or something? Because I did that many times, and it was hard. I had to sage my house a lot.
Oh, my gosh. So you went through all of these submissions from women, I guess, all over the country.
Yes.
And then you settled on them.
Yeah.
Take us through then the actual publishing of it. Once you made your selections,
Right.
How did that all happen?
Well, so Rich Seuss and I talked at the beginning of all this, and he was great because he was just like, I publish stuff all the time. It's easy. You can do it. And I was like, really? And he was like, you can definitely do it. Just do it. And it really is. I mean, I'm not the greatest with technology, but I am so stubborn. I will never give up. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Basically, I had to format a Word document,
Okay.
which I do realize there might be better programs to use for next time, but I was using Word. I was using CreateSpace, Amazon's self-publishing arm,
Okay.
for some reasons that I have talked about previously, but basically I wanted to make this as cheaply and readily available as possible, and I didn't want to either delay people getting the book or make it hard or have them pay a lot of shipping. So it's a choice with pluses and minuses, but they give you a little template. So I was working with the template, and you would think it would be as easy, like copy and paste, right? It's not that easy. And then Rich did warn me about the page number issues. It's just you just go into some sort of vortex of page numbers. Formatting the last 10 pages took me 4 hours.
Oh,
just
my
the page
goodness.
numbers.
Wow.
Yeah. But like I was literally just like sweating and being like, this will not break me. I am not quitting over the last 10 pages.
I will prevail over you.
And I really I wanted to make sure it looked as good as possible. I didn't want it to be like an obviously self-published book. I wanted it to look as clean and professional as any book that I worked as a bookseller. I bought books, and it matters how they look. So I didn't want to do a disservice to the work that's in. There's 55 pieces in here from 36 contributors, and I didn't want to do a disservice to their words by delivering a shoddy product.
Sure, yeah. And now you've had some book tour with that as well, right? In LA and New York, and did you do something in Philly too?
Yes. Let's see. We were in Philadelphia. I just realized been in 1 month, exactly. So we had the launch party in LA at the Bootleg Theater, which was a blast. And then I flew out to Philadelphia, which was kind of perfect because there were a few contributors there who had a good connection with someone who was very supportive, Larry Robin of Moonstone Poetry. And he's got a regular gig at Fergie's Pub. So we had like the whole upstairs of a pub, and we had contributors from North Carolina and Los Angeles in Philadelphia.
Wow.
Kind of amazing, yeah. And then I flew back here, and we had a party here in Joshua Tree. And then just got back from the Hudson Valley, where Woodstock, New York, where again we had several contributors, and it was a great crowd. Wonderful bookstore, the Golden Notebook, which is near Kingston, where I used to have my used bookstore a long time ago, which is what inspired the novel. So it was sort of a very triumphant full circle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Having accomplished this, how does that feel now that you've got a chance to kind of take a breath and look back on it all?
It feels amazing. I mean, it definitely feels like I am going to need to process this more. I've learned so much about myself. First of all, I'm definitely determined and a perfectionist, and I've had to let some of that go. Sometimes emails didn't get replied to immediately, and sometimes that's the way it goes. I had to keep a to-do list, and some things got pushed to the next day, and that's the kind of thing that used to drive me crazy. But this, it was perhaps a little bit more work than I thought it would be doing it, but it was really wonderful. And quite honestly, at the time that this all happened, I was really worried about my words. Like, I was kind of losing my words. I was getting so overwhelmed by the distress I was feeling about our politics. And that's why I looked to these other writers, because I knew, like, we kind of take turns. Sometimes I have the words, sometimes they do. And this time I looked to those who did have it. And I gave this really tight deadline, too. I only gave 4 weeks for people to send me stuff, which is what I think is part of what gives it this energy, is because it was written in a fury, you know.
Right.
But it's been wonderful, something I'm always going to be proud of, and it's also made me incredibly comfortable with the word cunt. I, can say it, and I think that's something, seriously, all women need to get comfortable with all the words for their genitalia. They need to question why that makes them uncomfortable, and whether or not you choose to say it publicly, you should try and get comfortable with it privately, because that is definitely misogyny at work, you know.
Oh, yeah.
That we cringe or gasp, you know, or scold people when we hear those words.
Well, I had the good fortune of being part of Mary Hunter's Thought Theater production of the Vagina Monologues, and I had the cunt monologue.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So we actually spell it out.
Yes.
Use all the different words for the C and the U and the N and the T.
That's amazing.
So that was a lot of fun to do that.
It's a good word. As I said at some point, it's, I mean, yes, pussy's been sort of partially reclaimed. I mean, I think it's been reclaimed. I think it's a great word. It's a fun word. But there's something, cunt is powerful. Cunt is like cock. Not to completely dirty up your podcast, sorry, but I wanted a power word for women, and I think cunt is it.
When I was at the party in Joshua Tree, you started off the reading with 2 pieces.
Yes.
And one of them, for whatever reason, and I'm sure I'll have a reaction when if you would read it again, but it seemed to, for me, when I heard it, it captured all those things that we are, quote unquote, supposed to be from a male perspective, that we try and fit into, whether it's clothes or a way of being. And I think that piece just put it all together, and hearing it was like, oh yeah. I think men need to hear it, because
I agree.
I think it would change their whole idea. I mean, I'm amazed at men I know who have daughters who their head is on swivel constantly.
Right.
The daughters see it.
Of course.
And then they start to think that, oh, that's what guys want, because my dad likes that. My dad likes that. I should be that. I should be that. And it's dangerous.
It really is.
It's very dangerous.
And it's from the beginning. And I think, for me, one of the more frustrating aspects of the whole Me Too movement was the apparent surprise from many good men. They couldn't believe it. We're all carrying this around all the time. It's yes. Yes, we are. From the time of our earliest girlhood consciousness.
Right.
We're taking it all in. And even the best well-meaning dads can't protect their little girls from all of society, which is also, whether it's the TV shows like that are mentioned in that piece or just society in general, magazines, ads,
Right.
It's improving a little bit now, but we got a long way to go still.
Well, something as simple as I have a story just living here, and you mentioned, it's gated and everything.
Yeah.
And there are men who live here either with partners or without.
Right.
And there have been 2 times that this one particular gentleman, when I've come in the dark, late at night, or been walking maybe from the laundry room or the mailbox, late at night, I don't see him.
Right.
And I don't know his voice because I don't live with him,
Right.
do you know?
Right.
And out of nowhere, in the dark, as I'm walking, hi, Dawn.
Yeah.
And the
It's so
second time, I
creepy.
really let him have it.
Good.
And ever since then, it's like he doesn't even want to talk to me, which is okay.
Right.
But I mean, think
Yeah.
when you're doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, but they just don't. On
it's
one
like,
hand, I'm
I'm a
like, they
good
don't have the
guy.
context
Yeah.
exactly
Right.
because they haven't experienced it, and they don't
Right.
ever. They would never know what that's like.
Right.
But it freaks me out.
Yeah.
Stop doing that. Yeah.
That I always am like if you're walking in a dark parking lot and you see a guy is walking behind you and you can tell he's fine, he's like on his phone, he's not paying
Right.
attention, but still like we are on alert.
Right.
This is what we have been taught. We've already got our keys between our knuckles.
Right.
Like
Yes.
men, they need to get it.
Right, exactly. And maybe it's us more speaking about it. Maybe it's something that we haven't done, and this is a great vehicle to start that, or definitely a time for that conversation to be happening and for the word
Part
to
of
get
a larger conversation for
Absolutely.
sure.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
happening.
Exactly.
But I do think that is one thing. No matter what is happening in our country politically, something that is also happening is that women are talking and they're not stopping. They're not
Right.
shutting up. They're telling their stories. They're telling their truths. They're finding out how many women share a lot of those similar experiences.
Right.
And I think that can only help. We are so trained to withhold the disturbing stuff, whether it's medical stuff or emotional stuff or just sort of general uneasiness in the world. And I think we're running out of energy to do that, or certainly I am.
Right, yeah, because,
I think so. It's like, would you like
I
to
would
read
love
now?
that, yes.
Wait a minute, sorry. The piece you're referring to is called Everything But by Lisa Allen. Friday night popcorn meant watching Dallas and Knots Landing, meant scratching Dad's feet with a fine-toothed comb while he rated tits and racks, meant learning smart girls aren't fuckable and girls who try to be pretty are sluts who think they're too good for the average Joe. Meant sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of his recliner silently, cataloging which muff he'd like to dive and which actress he'd bend over the desk to fuck the shit out of. Meant learning girls who say no are dumb bitches who don't know what's good for them. Meant feeling cheeks pink when he said beaver and I thought he meant the creature. Meant learning men want tight twats and bouncy boobs. Meant hearing girls' mouths are meant for one job only. Meant thinking the space between my legs was square and folded in upon itself if assembled right. Meant knowing men are only men when they give it to her good, and girls are only good when they take it. Meant never wanting kids because giving birth stretches that shit out. Meant not trusting the guy who just wants to get in your pants and knowing they all want to get in your pants. Meant sawing that comb between his toes until the skin broke. Meant listening to him groan, yeah, 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 harder. Meant being dateless through most of high school. Meant bowing my head in hopeless surrender. Meant remembering the magazines I sneaked into his room to see. Meant the shame in my panties when I looked at the pictures and the point of my nipples when I read penthouse letters. Meant steeping in stereotypes and expectations and returning to the floor in front of his recliner when I look at myself in the mirror now, reduce myself to parts. Means wondering if Daddy's little girl ever grew up. Means still wanting to please, be pleasing, please to stop, please stop. Means realizing Dad is Donnie, and Donnie is Dad, uncle, cousin, friend, teacher, preacher, good guy, that guy. Feeble men wielding power, like bloated sprinkler hoses, jerking on the lawn useless but for the swamp left in their wake.
Thank you.
I was very honored to have that included in the anthology, and definitely felt like it was some sort of point within the book from which we needed to turn, because that, as you said, that is everything. That's how we're raised.
Right.
Everything, but even if it's not actual physical abuse, it is abuse.
Right.
And we grow up thinking we look wrong, we are wrong. Whatever's expected of us will only make us more wrong.
Well, and then we carry that into any relationships that we have along the way.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah.
So thank you for reading that here.
Oh, sure.
And thank you for publishing this important book.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I did. I mean, when I tell people that I did it, I say I had the privilege of editing and publishing it, which I really do think it was. I had the time, I had the ability, so I did it.
Right.
And that's possibly not something I would have felt able to do before I came out here. But out here, people have this sense of just like, well, if I want to do it and no one's already doing it, maybe I'll just do it.
Right. Yeah, it's that.
And so I would like to continue this conversation here. I would like to have more of a feminist conversation, whether it's open mics or readers, but keeping it specifically until and unless things get a lot better.
Right, exactly.
In the country at large.
Right. Well, and it's a way, again, for women to share and connect their experiences, and for all of us also to not feel alone in experiencing what we are experiencing during this time in our lives. So I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah. Keep you posted. Right now, I'm still just recovering from the travel.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, it's been within a year you've put this all together,
yes,
right?
It was actually, it was June 4th when I announced that I was going to do it, July 4th when submissions closed, and September 5th, I think, when it went on sale. So it's
That's
just
amazing.
Crazy fast.
Yeah.
Because I thought we do kind of hurtle from one chaotic disaster to the next with this president, but I really thought surely those children will be returned to their families by then, and people won't even remember this episode. But that was not to be, and it turns out that more people than I would have thought get it immediately, and they like it because just the title itself feels defiant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I think it's a feeling that makes us feel stronger.
Right, empowered,
yeah.
Or emboldened, take your pick.
Right, right.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with us today and reading the poem from the book. That was special.
To be here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Did this discussion or the piece that Susan read stir something up in you? Leave a comment on the Facebook page, or if it's more comfortable, send an email to me at desertladydiaries@gmail.com. Next week, I'll be talking to photographer and musician Jennifer Ruggiero. She'll tell us about her lengthy part-time love affair with the desert before becoming a full-time resident. And I want to give a shout out to you, Christy, for signing up for the weekly newsletter. Thanks so much for your support. And enjoy this holiday weekend. With time being so precious to all of us, I want to thank you for spending some of your time with me and these amazing desert women. Thanks so much for listening.